This video is being brought to you by Multimedia Science, creators of science software and materials, and teacher tool software. We will be showing you how to create your own science simulations using an authoring tool called Clickteam Fusion, formerly known as Multimedia Fusion. Clickteam Fusion allows you to create your own software applications with little programming experience and includes a number of other tools like a built-in graphics editor. In this video, we will be building an element shootout game. This is a game that could be used in a chemistry classroom, and the game idea could be used in a number of other curriculums. The first thing we will do is download a free demo copy of Multimedia Fusion. Open your browser and go to the website www.clickteam.com. Clickteam is the name of the group that has created Multimedia Fusion. Move your mouse over Creation Tools and select Clickteam Fusion 2.5 Free Edition. Click on the Download Free Version Now button and then select Run. Continue the video when you have finished installing the software. The final software that you create will run on any PC with Windows XP or later and can be exported to a number of other platforms, including Android, Flash, HTML5, and iOS. Double-click on the Clickteam Fusion 2.5 icon on your desktop. Choose File and New, creating a new application. Clickteam Fusion is laid out in three parts, which can be accessed from these three buttons. The first is the storyboard editor, where all of your frames are listed in order. The second is the frame editor, where you add objects like graphics and object properties to your frames. And third is the event editor, where you tell the objects in your frame what you want them to do.
Okay, we only have one frame, so we can click on the one. This takes us into the frame editor. The basic idea of this game is we are going to have symbols for the elements, like H for hydrogen, and they will be falling down from the top of the screen, and we will have some kind of a shooter which will be able to shoot them. We also will have a string or a text at the bottom which will give us a hint of which of these elements that we should shoot. So let's start by making a few elements. We're going to go up and insert, again, one of the most powerful objects, the active object, because we're going to want it to interact with the shooting object. We will double click on it, which will take us into the graphics editor. I'm going to get rid of everything in there by using the selection tool and the delete button. And I'm going to click on the text tool. I'll click inside, and let's make our first element H for hydrogen. You can see that the element's a little small, so I'm going to change the font to maybe 16. That should make it big enough for us. I'll put it into the middle. I'm then going to close out the text, and I'm going to use the crop tool just so it doesn't take up any more room than it has to. So there is our first element symbol. Now it's not going to stand out very well against the white background, so I'm going to go to the frame itself, and as you can see, the frame has a set of properties all its own, and if you click on the check mark icon here, you'll see one of the options is to change the background color. I'm going to make that a light gray. You can make that whatever you like, but I think that makes the yellow letters stand out pretty well. Now we're going to have a lot of these. I'm only going to make maybe 3, but we're going to have a lot of these at the top, and we're going to have to do obviously some programming to get all this to work. And there are some tools in Clickteam Fusion that will allow us to make that programming a little bit easier. One of those is to give this a qualifier. So if we click on this little button that looks like an Excel spreadsheet, and we go to qualifiers, and I'm going to edit the qualifiers, I'm going to add one, and I'm going to make it good. It doesn't really matter which one that you choose. So now this object, not only being an H element, active object, is also a good object. Also, I want to give it a motion. We want it to essentially just move down the screen. So I'm going to click on the little man, the movement icon. I'm going to choose what's known as a path motion. And I'm going to edit the path motion. And I'm going to add a node. And I'm just going to make that node be down at the bottom of the screen. And what will happen is the object will move from the top to the bottom of the screen. I want to worry about the speed later because we'll change that because 50 will be kind of quick. Okay, so we have our object. It has a qualifier. It has a motion. Now I can clone that. And again, you don't want to copy. You want to clone. Okay, we have our cloned H. What we want to do, of course, is make that into a different element. So I am going to do pretty much the same thing. I'm going to get rid of what was there before by selecting it and hitting the delete button. And because I cropped it, it's a little bit small, so I'm going to go to the size icon, and I'll just make it 32 by 32, width and height. Make it a little easier to see what I'm doing. Going to use the text tool again, and let's make helium. And I'll center that, close out. I will crop, and now I have my second element. And what you'll see is if you go over to the events button, you'll see that it is, because it was cloned, it has the good icon. It is a good qualifier. And if we go to the motion, you can see it also has the path set already. So that's one of the reasons we did that in the beginning. I'm going to do this one more time. Let's clone it. Let's change its symbol. I'll erase it. I'll resize it. Apply it. I will add a new symbol. I'm going to pick B for boron. Again, it doesn't matter which one you choose. Center it. Close out of the text. Crop it. And say OK. We now have 3 elements that we can use as examples for our game. Let's test this out. We can go up to the Run Frame icon and see what happens when we run the application. You can see that these symbols very nicely fall to the bottom of the screen. But 2 things. First of all, they're moving very quickly. And second of all, they're always going to be in the same place. And there'll always be only one of each. So let's take care of that. Let's go to the event editor where we do our programming. And the first thing that we'll do is at the start of frame, and we'll find that under the storyboard controls, the horse and chessboard. we'll right click, and I'm going to choose as my first condition start a frame, and I am going to set the velocity under movement. I'm going to set the speed to around 15, and then we can run the frame, and you'll see that now they're coming down at a much more leisurely pace. You also notice that I only had to put in one piece of programming, one event, because I chose the good group, which means all of the good objects. And I'm going to just move this over here to make it a little neater. All of the good objects can be controlled by making events on the good group. Okay, next we want to come up with some way to have a random place for these symbols to be created. So I'm going to go back to the frame editor, and I'm going to make a little fake object, an active object that we can randomly move around to use it as a source for creating these elements. So I'm going to insert an active object, and I'm going to edit it. And in this case, I'm going to use the rectangle tool, filled. It really doesn't matter what color you make it. I'm just going to fill the whole thing in. Say OK. And I'm going to reduce it to a really small size. I'm going to take it off to the side just in case, so that it doesn't end up moving around into the frame, which it shouldn't. But why take any chances? Okay, now we're going to essentially make this active object, and let's rename it and call it our object position, if you want to. It's where our objects will be starting from. And we'll go back to the event editor, and let's choose some amount of time. I'm going to say, we'll go to the timer, and I'll say we'll get rid of the seconds, maybe every 5/10 of a second, we're going to place our object positioner randomly somewhere along the top of the screen. Let's go back to the frame editor again. You can see down the bottom, it very nicely shows us exactly where our cursor is at. This is the X and the Y pixels, and we've been using a 640 times 480. So we want the object to be somewhere between 0 and 640. So let's go back to the programming, and I'm going to right click. I'm going to choose the position of the object, the X coordinate. We don't want the object to move in the Y direction, up and down. We just want it to randomly be positioned in the X direction. And I'm going to type random and 640. Let's just make it 600, so we have some room. That means that it could start as right at the beginning of the screen at 0 all the way up to 600, which would be 40 from the end. So I'm going to add 20 to that. And what that means is that it'll either be somewhere between 0 and 600, so it'll be 0 plus 20, which will be 20 from the left side of the screen, or it will be a maximum of 620, which will be 20 from the right side of the screen. So this takes a little bit of thought in order to get this randomness to work. Okay, so let's go back again to the frame editor, and I'll place this down so you can see exactly what's going to happen, and run the frame. And you can see it's very nicely jumping back and forth randomly. And now we're going to place our symbols and create them at random positions at exactly the same place our object positioner is at. Okay, let's close out of that. Go back to our event editor. I'm going to drag this out of the way. Go back to our event editor. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create each of these objects every so many seconds at the position of the object positioner. So let's say the timer every, right click every, and it's just sort of up to you to play around and decide what you like. Every 2 seconds, I'm going to create one of the H's. So I am going to go to the create object, create new objects, and I'm going to create an object. It's going to be an H, and I'm going to create it relative to. Now you could create it at a specific position, like right here in the frame, but I don't want it to be there. I want it to be exactly where my object positioner is. So I'm going to choose that 0, 0 from that object. In other words, right where that object is at, I'm going to create an H. Then, in order to stagger these, you don't want these to all come down at exactly the same time. I'm going to say, okay, let's make this 1.5 seconds. I'm going to do the same thing now. I'm going to create an object, only now I'm going to create a helium symbol, an HE. Again, it'll be relative to the object positioner. And of course, the object positioner will have changed its position. So this will be coming down in a different spot. And one more. Looks like I messed this up. It says timer equals. I don't want timer equals. So I'm going to replace this with every 1 second and 30 seconds. You got to be careful. One more time. Clock, the timer, every, let's make this 2.5 seconds. We're going to have a boron come down. So we'll create a boron. We'll create it relative to our object positioner at 0, 0. So let's see how that works. So you can see we are creating the objects. There are a few problems. First of all, you notice that our 3 objects that were up at the top came down to begin with. And these are all kind of moving pretty fast. The other possible problem is you see every once in a while we end up with 2 of these symbols right on top of each other. The joys of programming. So let's go back and solve some of these problems. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say always. I'm going to go to the special, always, and I'm always going to set the speed of our group. All of these will always be set at a speed of 15. So you can see what happened. We set the speed of these objects, but the new objects that were formed didn't take those speeds because we had set that at the start of the frame, and these objects were created later. So now we'll always have the speed set at the same. Also, what we can do is we can say, well, gee, if one of the group objects collides with another group object, we don't want that to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to destroy those objects. And very nicely, the only objects will be destroyed won't be all the objects, but only the objects that are colliding. Again, hopefully you can see the power of using the qualifier in doing your programming. The third problem was, we'll go back to the frame editor, we had these three objects coming down right at the beginning. So let's just drag those off to the side. We could destroy them. It's another way of doing it, but I'm just going to pull them off. So now they'll fall down, but we won't see them. So far, we have now created our elements falling from the top. The next step we need is to create a way to identify which ones we want to shoot and create the shooter. Okay, let's go back to the frame editor and start to set up basically our question at the bottom. Which element symbol do we want to shoot? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a new object, and I'm going to choose a backdrop. And you can use backdrops in active objects and text to give it a name and to pretty this up as much as you would like. Double click, you can see it's a little different. There are a little different options, but still basically have the graphics editor. I'm going to just choose the filled rectangle and choose a nice blue color like that, and then I'll click on the object until I get the little squares around it, and you can use the arrow keys to place it exactly where you want. You can have it overlap, or you can try to be real nice and make it pretty. Okay, so we have a little backdrop. Next thing I'm going to do is insert a new object. I'm going to go down and insert a string. This is essentially text. And I'm going to put the text in here. And I want the text to, this is the font, the text options, the font. I'm going to click on the font. And again, I usually use Arial because almost all the machines have it. I'm going to use bold and maybe 16. Let's see how that looks. It's pretty big. Maybe I'll go down one less and do a 14. And I'm going to make the color yellow, maybe dark blue. Again, you can play around with the color combination that you'd like. And I'm going to double click in there, and I'm going to make the text say element equals. So this is where we're going to basically say, what element are we going to want to shoot? And then I'm going to make a second text object, string object. So this is just a text. This isn't really going to change in any way. The element is always going to be the element equals. And again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'll make this Arial. I'm going to make this bold, 14. Let's make this yellow. So then now this sort of is the same color as the elements that are falling down, the symbol elements that are falling down. Now, one of the powerful things about the string object is that if you go to the main property, the settings, you can have as many paragraphs as you would like. So I'm going to start with the first paragraph, and I'm going to make that our first element, hydrogen. Then I'm going to add a new paragraph, and let's make that HE, that would be helium. And paragraph 3, I'm going to make that boron for the B. So now we have our three elements that will be the question, essentially. We need to go back and make it so that we have some kind of a random choice between the elements that we want to shoot. Well, it looks like the code is just starting to get a little bit messy. So let's see if we can't make this a little clearer. There are a couple different ways of doing this. What I'm going to do is click on the start a frame here, and I'm going to insert a comment. And let's just say here that we are creating falling elements. As you can see, that sort of tells you what these lines are doing. Notice at the start of frame here, we set the speed of 15, and here we say always set the speed of 15. So this is actually a line of code that we can just get rid of. It's a duplication. I just wanted to show you what the elements would look like when they were falling. We have this always set speed to 15. We might drag that down and just move it a little bit. Click on it and add a comment and say set speed of falling elements. Just in case we want to find that, it will be easy to find. Our next step is going to be to select which element we want to shoot at. So let's insert a comment and say select element to shoot at. And again, you can really name these anything that makes sense to you. So now we need a way to tell which one of these elements has been chosen as the one that we want to shoot at. So I'm going to say at the storyboard controls, we're going to choose at the start of the frame. We're going to give these elements something to identify them. And it turns out there's an easy way to do that. All active objects and many other objects have what are called alterable values, alterable strings, and flags. I'm going to use an alterable value, and I'm going to set the alterable value of h to 1. And notice there are a lot of different values you can choose, but I'm going to choose alterable value a. You could also give it a name, but since we only have one here, I'm not going to bother. And I'm going to drag this over here, do the same thing, except now I'm going to say alterable value 2. And I can drag this condition over here and say alterable value 3. So it's a nice, easy way to make the same condition without having to do all the work. So now we have, at the start of frame, we've set these up. Now we need to choose one. In order to choose one, I'm going to go back to the frame editor, and I'm going to insert a counter. And let's name the counter, and we can call it chosen element number. So this counter is going to tell us which one of these 3 elements is the chosen element. And what we need to do is set the counter, and we want it to be either 1, 2, or 3. So we'll use our random, and we're going to say 3. The way the random works, it starts at 0 and will go through 2. So it'll be 0, 1, 2. So we're going to add 1 to that. So it'll now become 0 becomes 1, 1 becomes 2, and 2 becomes 3. So we'll have 1, 2, or 3. Okay, next we're going to make the string. We probably should have given this a name. It would have been nice. So I'll go back to the frame editor, and instead of string 2, let's call that the element, or make it even better, chosen element name. I'll go back to the event editor, And so we can say if the chosen element name, we're going to compare the counter to a value. If it's equal to 1, then we're going to go to the chosen element name and we're going to set the paragraph. Remember, we had 3 different paragraphs. One was hydrogen, one was helium, one was boron. We'll set it to hydrogen. We can copy this condition by dragging, double click. We'll say, well, if the chosen element is 2, we'll drag this and we can edit it and say, well, we want helium. And one more time, if this is 3, we'll make this be boron. So let's see how this works here. You can see that we've started it. It's chosen a random value of boron. If we start it again, you can see that it's chosen a different random element. Now this is great, but this is only going to happen at the start of frame. And I did that because what we're going to do next, we're going to say, well, every so many seconds, we're going to want to do this again. We want to give the person or the student who's going to be playing the game so much time to shoot one element, and then we want to give him so much time to shoot a different element. So let's say every 10 seconds, and again, you can make this anything that you want, we're going to essentially do everything again. We're going to and thankfully that's as easy as just dragging and resetting our random counter. Okay, let's look at a little trick here. Notice that we have our 3 numbers and we're choosing our 3 paragraphs for our 3 elements. That if we had a bunch of elements, this would be a lot of lines of code. And we can make this a little simpler by at the start of frame, we can just go over to the chosen element name and we can say set the paragraph equal to, and we'll use a calculation and we'll use the chosen element number, the current value. So now whatever that number is will be the paragraph that is chosen, and we can get rid of these 3 lines of code. And then we can do exactly the same thing see here we got to set the counter random 3 plus 1. So we need to display the paragraph again when it's reset. And I'm just going to move the 10 seconds down there and copy this display paragraph. Just so good programming practice that the setting of the random number is before we set the paragraph. Finally, it's going to be tough for the person who's playing the game to know that the change, sure, it's every 10 seconds. It's hard to know when that change has been made. So I'm going to add a sound, a sample. So we're going to right click, we're going to go samples, play sample, and we're going to have to go to a little bit of trouble here. We're going to have to find out where Multimedia Fusion stores its samples. So we're going to go to computer, your main drive, typically the C drive, program files. We're going to look for the Clickteam Fusion free edition, samples, and we're going to have to choose something here. Let's just see, you can play it. I'm going to use the camera, but you could again choose some other ones. Note that in the real version of Clickteam Fusion, there's a ton of more samples for that you can use. So let's open that. Now let's see what happens. So here's the boron. You can see the elements are coming down. And you can see, unfortunately, you see the boron is still there because it must have chosen the boron consecutively. There it goes. So we might want to actually go through and put in another line of code to make sure that this doesn't duplicate itself. But I'm not going to do that right now. Also, you probably wanted to make this, instead of a background, made it an active object so that you don't see the elements going down. You know, you could hide them by bringing this active object to the front. So there's a lot of little things that you might want to do to clean this up and make it look a little bit nicer. Okay, we have the elements to shoot at taken care of. Now we need to figure out how we go about shooting those objects. So let's go back to the frame editor and we'll go to the library. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot to choose from in the free edition. Let's go to game objects and we'll just pick one of these. Doesn't really matter. And we will. So this will be the object that does the shooting. And we'll go back to the library toolbar and we can just pick any one of these balls as our object that will be shot. Probably want to make it relatively small. Now we need a way to target our small ball. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy our object positioner, clone it. Actually not copy it because that would make it identical. We don't want that. And let's rename it and we'll call this the target. Sorry, I can't type all the time. And then we'll go back to our event editor. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, let's do a comment. So we'll insert a comment that will say shooting elements. And the condition that we're going to have is, we'll go to special, right click and do always. We're going to always take our target and make sure that its X position, the X coordinate, is the same. And we'll go here to the mouse pointer and keyboard, right click, we'll make it the current X position of the mouse. Okay, we'll do exactly the same thing with the Y position. We'll take the Y coordinate and we'll make it equal to the current Y position of the mouse, so that wherever our mouse goes on the screen, we're going to have our little target. So we now have something to shoot at that we can move around and set wherever we want. Now, since we have the start of frame, we probably should take this target and make it invisible because we don't really want to see it. There's no reason because we have the mouse pointer, so we'll make that object invisible. So now we want to shoot this object here, our small ball. So we're going to say, well, whenever we click our mouse, so we'll go to the mouse pointer again, we'll go mouse, and user clicks. We could make it that, and we'll make it the left button, single click. So whenever that happens, what we're going to do is we're going to shoot from our brick. That's our shooting object. So we're going to right click and we're going to choose launch an object. So this is the same as shooting. We're going to shoot the small ball. So that's the object that we're going to shoot. And we're going to want to, we don't know what direction it is because it's going to be wherever the mouse pointer is at the time. So we're going to launch in the direction of, and again, you see we have our same choices. We could choose a point on the screen, but that's some random point, we don't know. We're going to choose relative to our target. So wherever the mouse pointer is at, our target's going to be there, and that's where we're going to shoot. Speed of the object, we'll just make it 50. You can always change that if you think that that's too fast. And now let's see, we're going to run the frame. And you can see we're shooting our object. And it's shooting wherever I point the mouse button. Okay, we've got everything set up. It's time to do the scoring. So I'm just going to add a comment here and call it scoring. So what initiates the scoring process is that we hit one of the elements with the ball. So that's the first thing we want to put here is we want to say when the ball collides with another object, which is any one of the three elements, the good element. And then we want to say, well, that is actually correct. So what we want to do is we want to insert a second condition, and you can have actually a number of conditions in any one line. And this is where you can run into a little bit of what I would think is a bug in the program. If you click on the good object and then go alterable values, compare to one of the alterable values, this will not work properly. Instead, you need to go to right click here and say compare two general values. The first one will be the alterable value A. That tells you which one of the three elements we hit. And then we have to say, well, is that equal to the one that we were supposed to hit, the current value of the chosen element number? If so, then we want to give ourselves a score, and there's a couple different ways we can do that. I'm going to go back to the frame editor, and I'm going to insert what's known as a score object. And I'll put it up in the right-hand side of the screen. And let's identify that as a score by cloning our text here. And then we'll just rename the text score. Go back to the event editor. Now we have our scoring object. And the way you score is you actually place it under the player number, because you could have more than one player. In this case, we just have one. And you can see here's our score. And when conditions are met that you hit the element and it's the right element, let's give ourselves 100 points. And we don't want the player just shooting away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and then I'm going to paste it, because what we want is essentially the same thing. What if the player hits an element but it's the wrong element? So we'll double click on this, and instead of equal, we'll say it's different. So you hit an element but it's the wrong one. So instead of adding, we'll delete that and we'll subtract 50. Again, you can put in whatever numbers that you think are reasonable. Now, this will get a little messy. So what I would do is whenever this happens, I would destroy the ball, no matter what the outcome is. And I'd also destroy the element that you shot at. So let's see how we're doing here. Okay, it looks like we're boron, so I'm going to shoot at boron, hydrogen, Doesn't seem to be working properly. I'm not getting any scores here, so there must be something wrong. Let's go back and take a look. And I think what you'll often have this happen when you're writing a program, that there'll be a bug, there'll be something that you forgot to do or didn't think about. So even though this interface is really, really easy to use to make a relatively complicated program, a lot of the things that happen when you were writing real code still pop up. And you notice that we're having trouble with the elements here, and they don't seem to be identified properly. And if you look closely, what you'll see is at the start of the frame, we set the alterable values, but as these elements are created, we forgot to set which alterable value that they are. So I'm going to go down to always, and probably should have done this at the beginning, and always set. Anytime they're created, they'll have their alterable values set correctly. While I'm here, let's also throw a sound in here. Sample, play sample, browse, and if you're right, how about we have a little bonus sound? And if you're wrong, we'll browse from a file. You notice how once we set this up, where our samples are, it automatically goes there, which makes it a lot easier than having to go back through all the folders every time. That sounds pretty bad, so let's make that a wrong answer. Let's see how it works. So that's hydrogen. Whoop, that's wrong. That's correct. That's wrong. That's wrong. Helium. That's correct. That's correct. So it looks like our basic game engine is now working. I'm going to stop here. Obviously, you can clean this up. You can make the letters look prettier. You can add some more decoration. You might want to add other elements to the game, but this is pretty close to a finished product. So let's look at an example of what a more finished product might look like. This is the name.element game, and there are several different examples. Here is, you can see very similar. We've got the elements coming down from the top. We'll start the game. You can see we're looking for copper, only in this case it's a little different. We have a little delay until our energy is high enough. Depending on the screen, you might get penalized if the element you're shooting at reaches the bottom. Could be that the screen will end or the game will end if you don't get all of the elements before they hit the bottom. So there's lots of different variations on the theme, so to speak. So obviously there's a lot of different ways that you can use this idea for making games of your own. Hopefully this video has given you a start in creating your own Clickteam Fusion science applications. And then we have the Multimedia Science Pinterest site. You can see we have pins for educational physics, educational chemistry, teacher tools, educational technology, educational science, and using games in education. Here is the URL. You can also visit the Multimedia Science blogs. There's a blog on educational science. There's a blog on teacher tools. So feel free to visit the website. There are many interesting links and many interesting articles on science and teaching. And finally, we have the Multimedia Science website, where you can find more information on the game makers, chemistry, physics, and modules. The website is www.multimediascience.com. Well, thanks for your time. We are planning more videos for the future, so stay tuned.